I am now going to use Erickson's theory, stage 7, and apply it to my interviewee's life story. When evaluating my interviewee's levels of generativity and stagnation, I really struggled to find any semblance of being stagnant. Her life story really revolved around caring for others, her immediate family, her community. She always supported her family, showed up for my own family at times, and even when at work, her main job was a professional clown, which involved caring for children in some capacity. So there really was no signs of stagnation. Regarding biopsychosocial factors, we didn't really touch too much on biology. She did mention her grandmother was severely overweight and unhealthy, but not too much other health-related issues and things like that we didn't touch on. Psychologically, her supportive upbringing, I believe, may have instilled a high level of self-esteem. She fondly recalled a story of when her father, an arts major in college, went to her second grade parent-teacher conference. He sat down with her art teacher and defended a piece of art she drew that she got a less than perfect score on. He declared that nobody could stifle his daughter's imagination, and she really retold this story with a sense of adoration towards her father, a sense of pride. Her family system as a child created a high level of family value as an adult, helping her to resolve this crisis of generativity versus stagnation. Also, as a child, she remembers spending entire days at the library reading. She'd she'd pick out book after book after book and just kind of escape for the day. She did say she carried this into her adulthood, and I believe she used it as a healthy coping mechanism when faced with trying times. Socially, my interviewee had a strained relationship with her religious background. She didn't consider herself religious necessarily, but she did have ties to the church where she grew up. And when she got pregnant at 19 with her first husband, she did feel compelled to get married. So let alone any options for adoption or abortion, she knew she had to get married according to her church. So this did steer her in a different direction in her adulthood. Also socially, in her later stages of adulthood, she did always display strong friendships and was stable at her many jobs. Points of oppression to be noted in her adulthood existed in a few different places. First of all, beginning in her church, her religious oppression when she felt like she didn't have any options after getting pregnant. She also suffered from physical abuse from her first husband. This oppression extended into the social realm, I believe, as her first husband's father was a cop. So he extended his privilege under the law to his son, having this physical abuse never being dealt with or addressed. He was kind of protected in a sense. Another oppression can be seen indirectly through her second husband, who suffered from mental illness, PTSD, and agoraphobia. There's a huge mental health stigma out there, especially we're talking decades ago. He didn't feel like it was an option to get treatment. So that is a form of oppression. Finally, economic oppression. She had to work several jobs. She made minimum wage. She barely made ends meet. And this is a form of economic oppression when we're talking about undereducated adults not having options. Factors helping her to be successful included her strong supportive family and her involvement within the tight-knit community in which she raised her children. This included her children's elementary school, neighbors, including my family, and community centers like the Police Athletic League, in which her children were highly involved in. She was definitely hindered early in her adult life with this early pregnancy. She did quit college, she got married, and this led to her, like I said, being overworked and tired. As far as my second theory to apply to her life story, I chose ecological theory. I'll move through some of the components and I'll offer some insight as to how this theory would apply. Ecological theory relies on the idea that people are actively involved in their environment and therefore in their own development. So when we look at ecological theory, we consider the individual, we consider the many environments in which they partake, and we consider the interaction between them all. So my interviewee in her adult life was a hardworking person who valued family and tirelessly supported her family. She's very active in her community and in her children's lives. Perception and the meaning we place on our own experiences is also a big part of ecological theory. As I mentioned before, after my interviewee told her story, she kind of looked back and she said she felt cheated in a lot of ways, like she was always one step behind, especially in regards to her second husband's physical and mental health issues. This perception of being cheated is a culmination of decades of working hard, only to lose her husband in the end. Components within the ecological system include adaptation, the ability to adjust to your environment. Like I said before, my interviewee worked several jobs to make ends meet. She was flexible in her living situations as adults in her life became ill. She was highly adaptable. Coping is another component. This has to do with the way we deal with negative experiences. In my opinion, my interviewee took on reading as an escape, as a healthy coping mechanism. Energy, how we engage with our environment, what we put in, what we get out of it. I do believe there was a pretty level playing field of energy that my interviewee dealt with. She put a lot into her community. Like I said, she was involved. And I do believe she reaped the benefits of that through different community organizations and our tight-knit neighborhood. Interdependence has to do with the mutual relationships with each other and the environment. So my interviewee had a high level of interdependence with her community. And then finally, transactions. Those are the interactions with others, and they can be positive and negative. My interviewee had positive interactions with her community, her neighborhood. Within the home, there was a lot of negativity, especially with her second husband. He didn't get the mental health he needed. He drank a lot to cope. Outside of those environments, we can talk about the VA, and she had negative transactions with the VA as well, because she didn't feel that they were there for her husband. There are 4 systems within ecological theory. They are the microsystem, that is your immediate environment, school, home, work, playground. With the exception of her husband, I would say that her experience within her microsystem was fairly positive. Then you have the mesosystem, which is essentially the system of microsystems. How are your microsystems interacting with each other? This would be shown in a work-life balance. My interviewee did not display a healthy work-life balance. She couldn't really. She had to work. And then you have home and school, neighbors and family. She experienced positivity within these realms. The exosystem is what you're not dealing with directly, but has an effect on you. So maybe your community center, like I mentioned, the VA, systems like that. And then you have the macro system, your larger cultural factors, which would be your laws, your politics, your cultural beliefs. A belief that it definitely impacted her family was that mental health is not something to be dealt with. All theories have their limitations. I'm going to discuss those of Erikson's theory. First, this theory, like most, cannot take into consideration all the differences in individuals' environments. There's so many varying stories, and there's so many varying rates of development. Another limitation is the way we look at the components of these crises. This includes how we define them. This includes how we measure them. I touched briefly before on the idea of varying types of measurement, and take generativity and stagnation. Some believe they exist on a bipolar linear scale, where if generativity is high, stagnation is low, and vice versa. Other models say they can coexist simultaneously at similar rates. These differences in views can create conflictions when evaluating clients. There's also societal norms. Some research argue that generativity is inherently more apparent in females simply because of our traditional caretaking roles. We can also look at the LGBTQ population, which some say develop uniquely to Erikson's theory. A final limitation deals with the misaligned notion that in order to progress to one stage, we have to finalize the crises of the previous stage. Some argue that this isn't the case. Maybe we can coexist within two stages at once. Without clarification, it can be difficult to assess a client's development using Erikson's theory. That finalizes my oral presentation. Thank you for your time.